Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Can We Please Talk podcast. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
And I'm Nick Severi.
Nick, my friend, how are you doing, sir? Back from the vacation break, a little 4th of July celebration. How's everything in the family over there?
It was good. It was relaxing, man. It's enjoying the summer, not enjoying the heat so much, but
Right.
But now the celebration was good. Dude, these fireworks though, I've said some things on Twitter about it too, but yeah, no, that was a little annoying. My oldest was staying up because we got basically mortar blast. It sounds like Call of Duty outside of my freaking house. So
the fireworks. Unfortunately, over the holiday weekend, somebody passed away. A Columbus goalie.
Never understand this.
Passed away from fireworks being shot in his direction. Unfortunately, jeez. I mean, that's just so crazy. To lose life like that. Over the weekend, an awful sports story. If anybody caught that over the weekend, I don't even know how we can transition because today's topic is something pretty heavy in terms of we're going to be discussing the Surfside building collapse. And what happened. That topic is been talked about for the last couple of weeks since the building collapsed a few weeks back. For those of you who don't know the area, Surfside's a little bit of like a mini town on Miami Beach, just north of in the 80s on Collins. The building has 2 towers over there, over on 88th and Collins. I used to live in the area actually on 80th and Collins, just a little bit south from there, about 8 or 9 blocks from there. So know the area pretty well. And, there's so much to this building collapse. We really wanted to talk about, there was some warnings about the structural damage and the building prior to that just kind of fell on deaf ears as recently as the week of. The condo manager was trying to, get some signatures about, hey, we need to pay to have some proper research done on this building. So it's just such a tragic situation. So Bianca Ocasio is going to be joining us from the Miami Herald. Her and her team down there at the Miami Herald have been doing a fantastic job covering this story, really giving a better perspective on what's happened. And a lot of the stuff has been used as well by the national media. Nick, I know on our last episode we kind of teased about this a little bit because of the sensitivities of it. There's still, a search and rescue effort undergoing. They took down the other tower, the remnants of the remainder of the tower, so they can continue the search and rescue efforts. And obviously, with that, there's been some other lives. There's been lives lost that were found, because of the taking down the other building. And I know we touched about it on the other episode about infrastructure, and this is another example. But give me some quick thoughts on your end when you saw the building collapse.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 levels to this. One is, first and foremost, we're talking about a tragedy to a local community. I think about, it's interesting that you and I are doing this show, or particularly this episode. Like for you, there's a more of a personal connection to this, living so close by. So like for you in this conversation, there's that reflection of like, people, or of people, like this feels different. This feels personal to me. As someone on the outside, it's just trying to understand, what is the impact of the community, from just from the building standpoint. How did we get here? Like there's a little history to obviously understand here. And at the same time, we have yet another building that does crumble. And what is that saying in a larger discussion about how the state of Florida takes care of its people, how the US takes care of its people. But then, the other part that our show represents is an analysis of the media, as it relates to news coverage. And, something that we've seen that I think I may have sent over to you was a really just good tweet about the difference between local coverage and sometimes what happens when that local coverage gets brought to the national level and what's lost in translation, what's not properly accredited. There's a lot of layers to that, the journalism nerd, you and I sort of pay a lot of attention to. So, this episode just is special on a couple of levels.
I want to touch real quick because you mentioned about the layers, and this is where Bianca is really going to fill in the blanks for us, because we talk about this all the time on the show. It's informational, educational. We want to learn more about the topic. It is a little personal to me. I've looked at that building specifically, in the last couple of years because we were trying to move down to Florida. I mentioned I lived in the area, but the layers to it, the condo board, management, not getting this stuff passed over time. You and I don't know anything about that, right? You own a home. I live in an apartment building in the city. So it's a little bit different with these condo associations down in Florida. She can take us a little bit under that. The other thing is that, in 2018, I mentioned and I alluded to this, that there was, I believe, a structural engineer who said, hey, this building, we need to do something about this because there are severe structural damages to the core of the building. Now, I don't know if his report actually stated that, a collapse was inevitable, could happen, but this is something that she can help us with as somebody who's been doing some of these, articles on the tragedy that really had happened. And some of the stories coming out of people near misses leaving. Obviously that building does have a lot of snowbirds that live in there, people that live up north and kind of travel down there for the winter. So the search and rescue efforts continue as of this taping. It's really a tragedy. 36 plus lives already lost. Our hearts go out to all the families and the victims. And after the break, Bianca's going to join us, really fill in the blanks and help us really understand and digest what happened in Surfside, Florida. All right. Like we mentioned at the top, she's a fantastic reporter at the Miami Herald, the El Nuevo Herald. And that is Bianca Ocasio. Bianca, Mike Leon, Nick Severi, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bianca, we wanted to get into obviously the tragedy surrounding what happened in Surfside. For our audience, which maybe not aware of the totality of the situation and what happened there, and I know you've been on the ground covering a lot of this. Can you give us, as of this taping, the latest news surrounding the building collapse?
Sure. So on June 24th, which was about 13 days ago at this point, around 1:30 a.m., a 12-story building just collapsed in Surfside, which is very close to Miami in Miami-Dade County. And right now, we are at 36 people who've been found dead. And there's over 100 people who are still unaccounted for or missing. Basically, this building just collapsing is really still a mystery to a lot of experts and, obviously to officials. It kind of, the way it collapsed was really as if you took a knife and just sliced a cake. I mean, you could see into apartments from the beach side. This was a beachfront condo building, and you could see bunk beds, you could see AC units kind of hanging from the concrete, and there was part of the building that was still standing for over a week, but it was demolished on Sunday night around 10:30. Obviously, a lot of people did not get to go inside. Residents who survived were not able to retrieve their possessions or anything because it was not deemed safe. And of course, it has been a grueling search and rescue mission. There's rescuers from, all over Florida, from Israel, from Mexico, people who know how to search in the rubble in these types of situations. And even they say, this is the most complicated and, just most difficult scene that we've ever been in. Just the way that it pancaked. I mean, you can really, especially in the first couple of days, you could really see one floor on top of the other. And in the beginning, they were able to rescue a child and a mother. But ever since then, they haven't really found survivors. So of course, a lot of families have been bracing for, terrible news, have been, bracing for what is the long-term going to look like when you've lost everything, even if you survived this tragedy. So it's just been really, really difficult and really heartbreaking to just see the way that everyone has been trying to pick up the pieces of what's left. And so, last week we had the first two children who were pulled from the rubble. They were ages 4 and 10, and they were actually had their funeral today. But it's just, it's incomprehensible, really. I live actually about 10 blocks from the collapse. So I'm always hearing sirens and ambulances and search and rescue trucks going over. It's the rescuers have endured, everything from ongoing fires to thunder. Right now we have Tropical Storm Elsa that's threatening Florida as well. They've had to stop on and off for the past 24 hours because of lightning. So, it's just been a really slow rescue mission because of the precariousness of the situation. But the demolition of the building was really due to the fact that it was going to continue to be a threat and going to continue to stall efforts because even last weekend, rescuers saw it shifting, and engineers were saying, this building is shifting. So we need to be really careful at, how we're dealing with this. So.
In your reporting, what are some things you've all been learning about? Because as you mentioned, like, rescuers are coming in and seeing that just from a infrastructure standpoint, like this kind of collapse, there's no way to explain, or at least it really stands out from what these folks have seen in other places. For you and the team reporting, what have you all been learning as far as what led up to this? What more information has been gleaned over these past 13 days from when we started with, a building collapse to getting more of a glimpse as to what may have led to it, or what potential signs there were that there was some, that this was a problematic facility?
So, there's a lot of kind of red flags here and there, especially probably, I think, one of the biggest ones is a report that an engineer composed in 2018, where he documented some very, just concerning damage in the structure of the building and the way it was designed. So, for example, under the pool deck, there was a concrete slab that was built under it, and it was supposed to have a kind of, ramps for the water that is accumulated could kind of drain. But that was built basically all at the same level, and it was all straight concrete, and it just accumulated for, over time. This building was 40 years old. It was built in 1981. So you could see in the garage, which was an underground parking garage, the concrete and the columns had exposed rebar. There's an engineer that could see that the pool closet underground was also, there was standing water. It was always flooding. Some residents said, that there were chronic leak problems in the building. Even, the latest kind of shocking video that we could see from before the collapse, just minutes before, a tourist kind of documented, rub pieces of concrete and just a lot of water just draining into the garage. And, she was recording it saying something is going on in this building, obviously. But then it just collapsed right after that. So quite frankly, we don't really know a lot about what caused this. We don't know exactly, whether it can happen again. I think that it has also created this sort of panic, right? And Mike, you're from Miami, so you know how much, these buildings are part of the landscape in the cityscape in Miami. So everybody's freaking out about, what does my condo association know? What does the building department in my city know about my building? What have engineers said about it? I mean, it's really created a sort of doubt and safety concerns about whether this can happen again, because we don't really know exactly what caused it. So yes, there were some red flags, but there's still a big question about, was it one factor? Was it a combination of factors? Was it also, like maybe corrosion from salt water, flooding? So it's I think too early to really understand why this happened and what can be done to prevent it.
Bianca, you fed right into the follow-up for that, because you mentioned, yes, I am from the area. My wife is from the area. Even my father-in-law is a project manager in the area as well. But I want you to take our audience really into, why does it seem that a lot of the buildings in Miami Beach area specifically are older? They lack basic upkeep. We saw another building that was evacuated for precautionary reasons. Is it the condo review boards? Is it the tenants don't want to pay? Like, take our audience into that, because, now that I live in New York, Nick lives in Pennsylvania, where he records from. We don't have similar type of, bureaucracy, let's call it, at those levels that these condo boards have in Florida. And have always had this stigma and association. So take our audience a little bit into that.
So I think something maybe some people don't know about Miami-Dade is that there are, over 30 municipalities in the county of Miami-Dade. So even though Miami-Dade County is responsible for unincorporated parts of the county, you still have all of these, the town of Surfside, you have, the city of North Miami Beach, you have all these towns and cities that are responsible, really, they have their own building departments. But of course, then you have the condo associations that also have a lot of power about how, repairs are made, how they're going to be paid for. For example, what we know about the Champlain Tower South is that there was a huge conflict in the condo association because they knew that this engineer had done a report in 2018 that said there are some concerns about this building's structure, foundational structure. So those costs have been estimated to cost from 15, or I should say, those repairs were estimated to cost anywhere between 15 and $16 million. And that meant a lot of money for these, homeowners, condo owners. And, Champlain Towers South was in a really kind of area that was starting to be developed. There was a huge building that was built right next to it. It was kind of along a short strip of beach that led up to Bal Harbor, which is, a very wealthy part of Miami-Dade. So you had this area kind of being developed, and this building that was built in 1980 was not really considered, the most luxurious condo in that strip of beach. So it doesn't, we can't automatically assume that the people that own these homes were willing to, put in all this money to make sure that their building was, repaired in the way that it needed to be repaired. So I think that really led to a lot of conflicts as to what are we going to do with this report that we got. But of course, again, we don't know the level of alarm and urgency that the condo association had. We don't know if the town of Surfside had the urgency and an alarm to really push for these fixes to be made. And so Florida actually has some of the strictest, building standards in the country. And some of that in Miami-Dade County has to do with after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, where some cities were completely leveled because of the way that some buildings were constructed and designed. So really, after Hurricane Andrew, a lot of those standards changed. And this building was back in 1981. So there's a lot of concerns about old buildings in Miami-Dade County and the types of standards that they had, and whether there was shoddy construction and shoddy design, and what was being allowed to be done that we are now kind of seeing the effects of. So again, I mean, there's so much that we don't know. We don't know who knew. We don't know who is responsible, who is at fault, if anybody, and if something could have been done at any point, and how that can be prevented for other buildings in the future.
Shifting the lens politically for a moment, I believe the president had just recently been down there. There was an exchange with Governor DeSantis, which people had praised as being just very civil. Politics not on the table, but this is really from a federal to a state level about support. What's been your read as far as just that conversation? And one thing I also noticed too was that there was some concerns from some of the just residents in the area. Like you're seeing politicians have access, just levels of access to the building around it that just ordinary citizens didn't, and that had been also raised as well. But just in terms of the political landscape, what's been the reporting that you've been seeing as far as what's going on there?
I think that one of the things that has stand out to everybody is just there really has been a lot of bipartisanship in the response. I mean, seeing Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican, stand shoulder to shoulder every day for almost 2 weeks with Daniela Levin Cava, who's a Democrat in a nonpartisan post, but it's been very interesting to see that they have been taking a lot of pride in that, it doesn't matter what party you're from or, what you belong to. We are just trying to get people the help that they need. And so we also saw that when President Joe Biden was here. And at one point, I was kind of in that briefing meeting for a couple of minutes, and the president was kind of talking about what he'd heard and what he had been briefed on, and he kind of touched DeSantis for a second on his arm and said, I know this has been hard for you. And then DeSantis kind of talks about how the president has really understood the severity of this from the very beginning. There's been no bureaucracy. There's been just complete transparency between all the different levels of government. And it was kind of interesting for me because I'm Puerto Rican and I actually covered the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, and that was unimaginable. I mean, you never saw that level of cooperation during that disaster. And so for me, it had an impact, certainly. But, I will say I have spoken to some volunteers and even some families who are in the Family Assistance Center that has been set up. And they have expressed a lot of concern about the fact that, there's kind of this parading of politicians. Some people who, it's not even their district. It's not, it's not their town. It's not their constituents. And they have kind of just been there, just talking to families and even showing up at the press conferences sometimes. And, that has kind of dwindled down as the days have passed, but it was definitely, a trend and a pattern in the very beginning. People who are up for re-election or people who are running and are candidates for some type of office. So, I think that's to be expected in things of this magnitude, unfortunately, but it has stood out to the families. They're like saying that they don't want politicians. What they want is fire officials. They want rescue staff. They want, who actually knows what's going on in that rubble. And they have asked several times if they can go see the rubble. Can they go see the rescuers? And they have been at least once. I don't know if they have gone again, but it's very heartbreaking because a big part of the reason why these families want to go into the rubble is because they believe they know where their families are. They know which apartment they were in. They know which part of the rubble they must be in, because this is really it's a desperate time for a lot of people. Even if there are no survivors. There's a lot of Orthodox Jewish people who lived in that building, and they have, certain concerns about the way the burial is going to take place and the timing of that. So, there are rabbis there kind of consulting with the rescuers about how that's going to take place. But of course, it's just what they want is the official information about what is going in the rubble. And politicians, for the most part, don't have that. So that's really what we've been hearing.
I want to get into the sister building because, and also what's next for people that, made it out of the building. We've seen some stories done on a national media level about people that have escaped from the building moments before, but the people that live in the sister building, what can you tell us about, are they evacuating that structure? I think there was early reporting on that they didn't have to leave, right? It was given an A-OK, and now there's been recent concerns from Mayor Bianca that she said that, the Surfside mayor, had said that there's concerns about, whether or not they should return to that. So what's next for all of these displaced residents of that tower?
So, I think the Surfside mayor, Charles Burkett, he's made a really big point of explaining that the sister building was built and designed by the same developer, by the same architect. It is a pretty much an exact copy of the one that collapsed. So they haven't done mandatory evacuations. They're not forcing people to leave. It's still, kind of giving the option of people, once they're ready to leave the building. But I can understand that a lot of people think, that this is just an anomaly, that it's not possible for two buildings to collapse in the same, same block in the same month, or people who really just don't want to leave for whatever reason. They don't want to lose their belongings. They don't want to lose their things. So I think that there are people who are still living there, but the mayor has kind of stepped up his kind of warnings about it, saying, I have major concerns and very serious concerns about this building because of what just happened. So I think that there is going to be a problem with the number of people who are going to be evacuated. So not just in the sister building, but I mean, in buildings that, where people don't necessarily have the resources to, get a hotel room or just go somewhere else. But their building has been deemed unsafe. So right now, Miami-Dade Mayor Bianca Ocasio, she's been ordering inspections in, in certain buildings throughout the county, and in every municipality they're responsible for their inspections. But I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of people who are going to have to evacuate because it's already happened. We saw it in North Miami Beach, and that has displaced hundreds of people. So I think that it is going to be a challenge, and I think that the county is kind of trying to figure out what is a long-term plan here. I mean, it shouldn't be a mass panic, right? I don't think anybody wants that, but it's also just a question of what are the warning signs? I mean, what is something that you have to take seriously enough to really consider that your building might collapse?
Reflecting on the coverage for a moment, for the work you and everyone at the Herald have been doing, what are some things that are starting to feel like in reporting that have been discovered, but are probably on the precipice for the next directions that this story is going to start to shift toward?
I mean, I think that's a good question. I think that we're asking ourselves that because we have been trying to write a story for every single victim and missing person in this apartment building. We're trying to talk to as many survivors as we can. We're trying to pull as many records as we can on, who knew what was known, what inspection reports are out there. So I have to be honest, I think right now it feels very hard to think about what's next. But I think we need to think about, the state of construction in Miami-Dade County. I think that there's been some theories about, is sea level rise a factor in all of this? We've spoken to a lot of engineers who don't think so, but I don't know. I mean, is that really a serious question that we need to be asking? So, and also just the amount of people who might be displaced because of this new kind of discovery that has emerged from this very tragic event. And there are so many people affected. I mean, the businesses that are in this area, the streets have been blocked off for several days now, and people who Surfside is kind of a sleepy town, and there's kind of the kosher restaurants, and like next to the synagogue, and there's the Publix, and all of that has changed really. And I think also thinking about the identity of this town, I think that there's an increasing awareness of, we don't want Surfside to be known as the site of this tragedy. We don't want it to be the collapsed city. So I think that's also something for us to really explore. But right now is really thinking about why did this happen, and what can be done to prevent it, who is responsible and holding those people accountable, and what is going to be at the legislative level, what is going to change if there is some reason to think that there was some lack of oversight in some way.
Obviously, it's the follow-up to that. The emotional toll that's going on for people who lost someone, who are trying to find out unfortunately, if they have, obviously weighs heavily on the residents and the community itself. But both for you and the other reporters who've been doing this work, that toll lives differently with you, but there's a weight there nonetheless, and we feel it just in this conversation today. How do you all just how are you all just surviving just emotionally? How do you all support one another? One thing I want to shout you out for is, the reporting has been very much a team effort. Like everyone is just shouting at one another, retweeting. It's a lot of pieces that tell us like this can only be done, when a team of journalists are doing the hard work and the most meaningful work. Like this is why this field is important and exists. But it's all a long way of me of saying, how are you all supporting one another? How are you all doing in the midst of the tragedy that you have to be the storytellers, unfortunately, for?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that the toll is very different for us. So we're not, directly impacted, and we're not on the rubble ourselves. But I think that it has taken a toll because of how long it is taking to tell this story. The fact that we don't know the full extent, because we don't actually know the accurate amount of people who are missing. I mean, the county doesn't know the accurate amount of people who are missing. They're still trying to kind of piece that together. And it is just unlike any tragedy that I myself have been a part of. I know, some editors and more veteran reporters and me who have, worked through, 9/11, who've worked through stories that have taken very long to develop. And it's really devastating work, especially when it's this close to you. But I think that we're really just doing our best. We're trying to think of ourselves as, our role in this tragedy is to, yes, support our community through our storytelling, but it is also to take care of ourselves and, to realize when you need to take a break, when it is that you cannot interview another family member, you cannot interview, another rescuer who has seen so much on the rubble. So I think recognizing that is really important, and understanding that when you need to take a break, there will be somebody to step up and pick up where you left off. And that has been something that has been really important for me, to know that I'm part of a team, that I don't have to carry all of this on my shoulders, that we all kind of serve our purpose, but that we're here to kind of take over the other person when it kind of becomes too overwhelming for you. So, the first couple of days I was very heavily with the families. I was at the family, it was then called the Family Reunification Center. Then it was called the Family Assistance Center. And that really took a toll, because the families at one point thought that maybe their missing family members were maybe at a hospital. They were maybe rescued and taken somewhere. And they were showing their photos on TV, on, local national TV, hoping that somebody might have seen them. So at that point, there was so much shock with the families that we kind of wanted to also believe that there was hope to find more survivors than they did. And then I got very overwhelmed over, after 2-3 days of doing that. So I asked my editor if I could please just go cover officials for one day, so that I could, kind of recharge in some way. It's still very tragic, and you can see kind of the toll it's taking on local officials. But, I couldn't really do my job effectively if I was going to, talk to grieving families. And, they accommodated that for me, and some of my colleagues took over. So we've really been trying to rotate duties as much as possible, so that it's not one single person doing all that empathy work and all that trauma work, for several days at a time with no break.
Bianca, you do fantastic work at the Miami Herald. You can check out all of Bianca's work online. Follow her on social as well. I can't believe what you just said there about some of the building constructors don't think that the rising sea levels are not playing a factor. I in Miami sometimes. But I'm going to let you go on that note because you do fantastic work, like I mentioned, and keep up the great fight. You and your colleagues. Our heartfelt condolences to everybody suffering in the area. Bianca Ocasio, thank you for coming on the program today.
Thank you for having me and for covering the story.
All right, like we mentioned, that was Bianca Ocasio. You can check out all of her work, excuse me, at the Miami Herald, MiamiHerald.com. Obviously, she's also at El Nuevo Herald too. Boy, I mean, I was reading one of her pieces today, as of this taping, and it was really about some of the families. She mentioned it during the podcast, but there's a large contingent of Orthodox Jews that live in the area, that live in the building specifically. And one of her stories was about one of these families. And she mentioned it as well. Like the center used to be, a center where we're searching and rescuing so you can reunite. Now it's shifted in title. It's just such a tragic story. And then, like we talked about too, the off air with her, the financial analysis of that building and maintaining it, the upkeep for it, right, far outweighed the human analysis that was done. And it unfortunately led to loss of life. And it's so tragic. Nick, your takeaway from the conversation and what happened down in Surfside.
First takeaway is seriously, if you can hear Mike and my voice, if you're a listener, we obviously are grateful, but seriously, subscribe to the Miami Herald, subscribe to local journalists.
It matters. It matters.
It so matters, man. Like this kind of reporting. When Mike and I started this show, part of this conversation was like, how do you actually get back into a conversation about facts? How do you get into a place to present ideas from an informed place and have an informed discussion? We just talked to someone who's on the ground doing the meaningful work. Mike, you'll notice that in that entire conversation, whenever we've entered into a place where really we didn't have the information, Bianca was the first person to say, like, I don't know that. We don't know that. We're reporting what we do know. And that in and of itself is the spirit of journalism. It's the thing that I fell in love with as a major in college. I imagine I know it's what drove you to certainly, talking to me about moving forward and, building this amazing show. They're just doing amazing work, man. Like seriously, like support local journalists. Like this episode speaks to the importance of that. This kind of reporting is not going to be what's going to show up on the national airways. And if it is, it's because of the work of people like Bianca. At the same time, I thought she just was very open about what is the reality of doing this kind of reporting. Like, what is the actual emotional toll on you while it doesn't personally affect her and, her colleagues. But there is a toll to doing this kind of work, and it's important work, but that sits with her. And I thought she just was very open about, how she's coping, how her team is rallying around her, and how this is all feeding into a newspaper, just trying to do right by its citizens. Those are the things I'm sitting with right now.
Yeah, it's such a tough conversation. Obviously, we talked about this. I mentioned it before that I lived in the area. She lives in the area as well. She talked about that little area. So in Surfside, as it goes into Bar Harbor, and Bar Harbor's from 95th and Collins up, but down below up until about 79th and Collins from 95th is the town of Surfside. And Surfside really has one main street that has, a bunch of shops, a couple restaurants there, some are chains, some are small owned. And so it's a very small community, everybody kind of knows everybody, at least where I lived in my neighborhood. I knew the surrounding people. So I'm sure the community is struggling with this, especially when you see reports like ones that have come out from the Miami Herald about the 2018 report from the structural engineer, really, talking about the damage that the building is kind of under and what needs to be done to change it. And it fell on deaf ears. And then we get this. So it's it's a tragedy all around. Our hearts and prayers really go out to everybody involved, the people that narrowly got out, the people that have been displaced from this, the other people that live in the other tower, the adjacent tower. It's going to be something that will, live in infamy, specifically in that area, in that small knit community. So our hearts go out. If there's any way you can donate support to some of the local charities that are working down there to help out some of the victims and the people that have been displaced, we encourage that, to check that out. I'm forever grateful to Bianca for coming on the program. I echo everything you said about local journalism. It's really been a lot of the Miami Herald pieces that I've been reading to try to keep up. You want to kind of pick the town paper that will give you the best sense of what's happening on the ground from the people that live there and report from there. So continue to support the work that she is doing and everyone at the Miami Herald. As for this show, you want to subscribe to the pod, YouTube, smash the subscribe button, please. Audio podcast platforms, you know them by now. Leave us a 5-star review and comment, hit the subscribe button. You want to become a Patreon member, you can listen to more bonus content from all of our episodes, catch episode releases before they come out, get some fan merchandise, click on the show notes link, whatever podcast platform you're listening to us, or even if you're on YouTube, you're watching us, click on the Patreon link and become a subscriber today. It is just for the price of a cup of coffee and a bagel. Thank you, everybody, for watching, listening. We really appreciate it. As always, I'm Mike Leon.
Grateful for local journalists. I'm Nick Zaveri. Good night, everyone.
Have a good one.